Over the course of your lifespan, you will spend over 90,000 hours working. That's at least 1/3 of your entire life. Needless to say, how we approach our day-to-day work will have a significant impact on our overall health. The COVID-19 pandemic redefined what work meant for all of us. It not only forced us to change our work environment, but shed some lights on some aspects of corporate culture that have been traditionally tolerated or even expected in the workplace. The concept of work hard, play hard, and our faith in institutions to reward us for our hard work and dedication was tested, leading to what some of me officially referred to as the Great Resignation. Widespread worker shortages, supply chain issues, and sometimes embarrassing exposure on social media forced the hand of many business leaders to re-examine how they recruit and retain their workforce, including how they approach employee health and well-being. I have both an academic and professional background in corporate wellness and community health behavior change, so I have my own perspective and predictions on where this very interesting field will go and whether or not it's even worth it. My short answer is yes, it is. But my issue has always been how leaders tend to approach corporate wellness. My reasons surrounding these issues are pretty nuanced, obviously, and intersect the world of health insurance, workers' unions, technology, and policy. So I thought that a bit of a retrospective will help us piece a better conclusion together. This video will provide a high-level historical overview on employee wellness, explain how we got to this point. This is going to be a lot of information, so to sort of simplify it, I will refer to corporate, employee, and worksite wellness interchangeably, and I divided the historical timeline into a few parts, so grab a healthy snack and let's get into it. The root of employee wellness coincides with the middle-ish part of the first Industrial Revolution, which occurred between 1760 and 1840, facilitated by technological advances of British origin. This period of history was underlined by mechanized textile production, iron production, steam, and water power. There was also a second industrial revolution, or technological revolution, which expanded things like mass production and standardization with technologies like rail and electricity. But regardless, both parts of history were underlined by a work environment called the factory system. I'm sure you've probably heard of this in your high school history class, or maybe just me, which provided a division of labor and a work environment that facilitated a huge, unprecedented output of production. Rapid advances were followed by population growth as well as a general rise in income and standard of living. But today's standards of a bad work week really pale in comparison to what was endured by the workforce in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Factory workers often suffered through 14 to 16-hour workdays. There weren't any rules or regulations around safety or age limits, so workers, including young children, were often cramped into poorly ventilated areas, risking trauma from machinery and exposure to toxic vapors, dusts, and solvents. The first person to publicly advocate for employee well-being was a social reformer named Robert Marcus Owen, who in 1817 proposed the idea of an 8-hour workday. He also coined the phrase 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, and 8 hours rest. So that's who you can thank for your 8-hour workday. But a far more pioneering voice for employee well-being was an English surgeon named Charles Turner Thackeray, who wrote an entire book on just how problematic these industrial environments were on human health. His work also provided suggestions to improve such conditions, including access to proper hygiene, clean air, and time for recreational exercise. In his book titled The Effects of the Principal Arts, Trades, and Professions and the Civic States and Habits of Living on Health and Longevity, Thackeray wrote, "Attention must be paid to health. This obvious rule is strangely neglected by both workmen and their masters, and by the majority of mankind in all ranks of society. We rarely think of health till we lose it. It is especially incumbent on masters to regard their health of their persons they employ, to examine the effects of injurious agents, and to invent and provide remedies, and to enforce their application. This, to me, not only is a call to humanity, but a direct duty. Now, one could argue that the establishments of unions also had a hand in advocating for better working environments and employee health, but Thackeray's research and guidelines set precedent for some of the first iterations of worksite wellness from the 19th century and into the 20th century. In 1879, Pullman Railroad Company established an athletic association with their employee-only housing, and the National Cash Register offered exercise breaks for their employees twice a day, starting in the 1880s. In the 1920s and 30s, corporations like Ford Motor Company and Hershey Foods started introducing similar offerings. Now, these initiatives were definitely the exception rather than the norm, and by today's standards, they were pretty bare bones. But they definitely represented a noticeable shift in the mindset of employers. They basically thought that by providing these healthy recreational breaks and extra amenities, this would help boost worker productivity, keeping them strong, healthy as a horse, and efficient to meet the demands of the age.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
The 1940s represented a dramatic change of course for American healthcare coverage and thus employee wellness along with it. When the U.S. declared war on Japan and joined the Allied powers in 1941, there was increased demand for supplies because of the national draft. Many able-bodied men needed to go to war, so it led to a labor shortage and supply chain issues. Under President Roosevelt, the federal government also imposed wage and price controls to combat inflation, and this unfortunately prohibited employers from raising wages. However, fringe benefits like health insurance and sick leave technically didn't count as a reported wage, so employers actually started to take advantage of this loophole by offering health insurance packages along with some persuasive wartime propaganda to attract workers.
That we as a nation have it within our hands to make this post-war period an era of the greatest opportunity and prosperity in our nation's history.
After Roosevelt's death in 1945, his successor, President Harry Truman, had actually proposed a system of public health insurance. But this was fiercely opposed by a number of legislators and lobbyist groups like the American Medical and American Hospital Association, citing their concern for increased taxes and, unquote, socialized medicine. This policy failure set an important precedent and contributed to the rise of employer-sponsored health insurance. Between 1940 and 1960, the total number of people enrolled in health insurance plans grew sevenfold.
One of these is Yale University's School of Alcohol Studies.
After World War II, Yale University's Center for Alcohol Studies published comprehensive research and health recommendations for occupational alcohol programs. These programs primarily targeted war veterans with PTSD and alcoholism, and these programs became a model for what we know today as Employee Assistance Programs, or EAPs. As time went on, companies and private insurance plans broadened their support for different employee health issues. Compared to the pre-World War II era, organizations were becoming more aware of how employee absenteeism caused by illness, addiction, or injury affected their healthcare costs and bottom line. So leadership primarily focused on wellness programming with the hope of improving employee safety and physical health metrics.
Have you any idea how much cigarette smoking has increased in our lifetime?
Well, the population has increased.
No, I mean the rate per person. This represents the cigarettes smoked by the average adult in 1930. 30 years later, nearly 3 times as many. During the same period, the death rate from lung cancer multiplied by 10.
Outside of the health insurance debate, other public health initiatives and policy helped shape the new age of employee wellness. Most notable among them included the U.S. Surgeon General's report on the dangers of cigarette smoking in 1964.
400 pages to support one conclusion: health hazard. Cigarettes, they said, are a health hazard.
The establishment of the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, or OSHA, in 1970.
In an effort to stem this tide of injury, disease, and death, Congress created the Occupational Safety and Health Administration in 1970. In creating OSHA, Congress affirmed the right of every working man and woman to safe and healthful working conditions.
They have not only the right to expect, it's the law that they should be able to go to their work in the morning, give the employer so many hours for so much money, and be able to go home to their family that night the same way they walked in the door that morning.
And the establishment of wellness promotion-focused Washington Business Group in 1974. But at the conclusion of this time period, health researchers became specifically preoccupied with everyday habits like diet, stress, smoking, and exercise, and how that may contribute to chronic health conditions like heart disease, stroke, and cancer. And thus paved the way for a new age, shifting employer focus once again, this time toward employee health behavior change. The 1980s was a decade dominated mainly by two things: yuppie corporate culture and fitness. It also marked the appearance of the first official worksite wellness prototype established by Johnson & Johnson called Live for Life. The pilot version of the Live for Life program actually spanned between 1979 and 1983, with the goal to make Johnson & Johnson employees the healthiest in the world. The first part of the program's approach included a health risk assessment or questionnaire, which asked participants about their exercise habits, and body fat measurements were also taken. The second part of the program then provided support for employees who were seeking improvement for nutrition, fitness, weight loss, quitting smoking, and managing stress. The initial results for the pilot program were actually pretty encouraging for a large and very established corporation. This was a voluntary program, and it had a participation rate of over 50%. Worker absenteeism was reduced by 18%. Hospitalization costs for those who participated were reduced by nearly a third. And overall healthcare costs were reduced by 3 to 5%. The study also noted that the pilot program improved overall employee morale, satisfaction, and commitment to their jobs. On the heels of the program's success, more and more organizations started to offer on-site fitness, behavioral and psychological health programs, and smoking cessation programs. And then we hit another problem. Despite these efforts to bring healthy behaviors into the workplace, Americans started to gain some weight. A lot of weight. Obesity levels, while remaining relatively stagnant in the 60s and 70s, exploded in the 80s and 90s, doubling among adults and tripling among children. And many studies today now conclude that there are obviously a bunch of health problems that come with severe weight gain. So what the heck happened? Now, obesity itself is a complex issue, and I know that there has been a lot of public discourse around the healthy at every size movement. I want to acknowledge that, and I think that it deserves its own separate video. But it should be noted that the average hours of work per week actually increased during this time from 40 to 43 average hours per week. So while there were a lot of glitzy work amenities, much like the eras before, that did not affect America's work grinds. And the reaction of many organizations and companies regarding this obesity health trend wasn't the most productive nor helpful. at least when it concerned the structure of employee wellness programs. Their approach in the 1990s was to reduce the resources to merely identify and target the least healthy employees and not really pay much attention to the rest. In the realm of health behavior change, higher risk individuals are actually the hardest to engage, which is not surprising. I mean, who wants to be singled out and told what to do? So the participation rates for these programs usually remained pretty low, and program models were deemed unsuccessful. So now the question remains, if we're headed down this unhealthy path still, I mean, obesity rates are on the national average around 40%. Arguably, we're in a mental health crisis. Our overall life expectancy has dipped. And many Americans have reported stress and dissatisfaction at work. So what should the next step of corporate wellness be? Where do companies go from here, and what's their responsibility? Starting in the early 2000s, an alternative approach to earlier corporate wellness models was introduced by a wellness researcher and professor named D. Eddington. He proposed a concept called the natural flow model, which suggested that individual health risks without any intervention naturally flow upward due to age, from low to medium to high risk. The research showed us that if corporations provide nothing for healthy people in their population to help them stay healthy, they will eventually become those high-risk individuals with increasing health problems. So in other words, the best wellness program models support all individuals regardless of health status. Leaders should work on their company culture and environment first, leveraging organizational structure and baking health and well-being into its business strategy in a sustainable way. Later panel interviews of Eddington's career also lamented on the industry's over-reliance on health risk assessments. Although data and evidence-based medicine is a very powerful and useful foundation, they only measure certain aspects of human health. He said, we're in the mud, the muck, talking about risk factors and disease. What about health? What about real wellness? He urged corporate leaders to consider disruptive, innovative, and modern approaches of running toward health rather than away from health risks. This requires deep consideration of company environments, its culture, its behaviors, structure, beliefs, connection with coworkers and community, factors that truly affect our health on a fundamental level. I have to say that I do agree with Eddington in many ways. Not to say that the progress we've made regarding worker safety and physical health was a mistake or pointless. I just think that if corporations put so much effort into thinking absence of disease, let's collect all of this personal health data only to throw all of that back onto the shoulders of employees, all without considering if their own company environment is actually conducive or sustainable for healthy behavior change, then what's the point? This is not to say that companies need to become these perfect cultish utopias or be lax on growth and hard work. It's also fair to say that the world of health insurance, health policies, and technology will also have a strong hand in how we approach employee health in the future. But I think that the last year has taught us that a huge part of organizational health is, in fact, it's human beings. And yes, work is important to human beings. A comprehensive global study from Gallup with survey data from over 150 countries noted that career well-being, liking what you do every day, had the strongest impact on overall well-being. So companies that are investing in the development of these human beings on multiple levels of health, the mental, emotional, financial, communal, companies that prioritize transparency, diversity and inclusion, trust and morality, companies that view improved employee health as they would any other business strategy, are the companies that are seeing the most success, growth, ROI, and employee satisfaction. Wellness is so much more than office yoga classes, lunchtime nutrition seminars, and targeting physical health metrics. Certainly a part of it, but if you're just touching that, you're merely scratching the surface. And I don't see this mindset as a passing fad. I do think that my generation and subsequent generations understand the intrinsic connection between physical health and the emotional, social, communal well-being. But what do you think? I understand that I covered a lot of wellness history from the United States and the Western world predominantly, and that philosophy might look very different depending on your culture or industry. So please comment below and make sure to mention your background if you'd like to start a discussion. Please keep it nice. Thanks again for watching. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, turn on the notification bell. I will see you in my next video. Bye-bye.